Okay, welcome back to members of 121 Community Church in Grapevine, Texas, and our ongoing study in the book of Revelation by the Apostle John. We're going to finish up chapter 18. We're going to take a look at 18:17 through 24, and we're going to look at the judgment of Babylon and the sin of Pharmakia. The reason for the judgment of Babylon, or New Babylon, meaning Rome, as the sin of Pharmakia. Let's begin with block 1. And in block 1, we begin with the text of 17b through 19. And every shipmaster, ships, sailors, and maritime merchants stood afar off and cried when they saw the smoke of her burning, saying, "What city was like this great city?" And they cast dust on their heads and cried, weeping and wailing, "Alas, alas, the great city, in which were made rich all the ships in the sea. In 1 hour she is made desolate." And the verb here is enimao, meaning to be brought to complete desolation. Now the maritime merchants join the mourning for Babylon, but it's only sorrow for their own demise. And this passage is taken from Ezekiel 27, where it reads, "The mariners shall come down from their ships and stand upon the land and cry bitterly and cast dust upon their heads and wallow in ashes." And this is the lament over Tyre, meaning the lament over Babylon. Also, we can cross-reference Ezekiel 26:19 for the desolation. "Thus says the Lord God, I shall make you a desolate city, as if you were not inhabited, and bring the deep upon you, and great waters shall cover you." So the historical judgment of Babylon is taken up by John as the foreseeable prophetic judgment of Rome, which is New Babylon. They shall be brought to desolation, to complete wilderness, and their trade, the maritime trade routes, shall be depleted as well. They shall lose their trade along the coastline. But again, it's all about no real mourning for Babylon. It's individuals mourning their own loss of riches. It's all about money. It's all about pride. It's all about arrogance. It has nothing to do with true mourning at all. It's all self-centered egoism and the loss of riches, and that's the only real sorrow that's being illustrated here. But Babylon will be judged, and in block 2 we're going to read where Babylon is thrown down in judgment. So let's take a look at block 2, and we read in verse 20, "Rejoice over her, thou heaven, ye holy apostles and prophets, for God has avenged you on her." And the Greek reads, "judged the verdict in your favor against Rome." All believers are addressed here because of the inaugurated victory over Satan that will be consummated, and that's by, in Beale's commentary, cross-reference Jeremiah 51. "Then the heavens and the earth and all that is in them shall sing for the judgment of Babylon. Spoilers come unto her from the north." If we refer back to Revelation 6:9 through 11, the fifth seal, that was the seal of the martyred souls under the altar in heaven, praying for their blood to be avenged. So this is the answer to the fifth seal and the plea and the prayer of the martyred saints. Babylon, New Babylon, Rome, shall be judged for persecuting the saints and for executing the bishops of the 7 churches. In verse 21 we read, And a mighty angel took up a great millstone and cast it into the sea, saying, With violence shall Babylon be thrown down, and shall be found no more. And Blathsatai means to be cast down. It's used as future indicative passive. We cross-reference Jeremiah 51:63, where the stone of Babylon's judgment is cast into the Euphrates. So that's where John gets this, because the Euphrates ran right through the center of Babylon. But judgment will be cast down on Rome in the same way that judgment came upon Babylon. Also Ezekiel 26:12, They shall lay thy stones in the midst of the waters. So the image here is John visualizing the Euphrates and Babylon and the definite judgment of the living God against Babylon for idolatry and arrogance and greed. We've already mentioned those three, but that's why Babylon was judged: arrogance, idolatry, and greed. And John sees Rome as that same Babylon, as that kingdom that was foretold to be judged in Daniel. Let's move on to block 22. And the voice of harpers and minstrels and flute players and trumpets shall be heard no more, and no craftsman shall be found any more, and the sound of a millstone working shall be heard no more at all in thee. Christians were excluded from the trade guilds because of their refusal to enter into the imperial cult. They were excluded from trade because they wouldn't worship Domitian. Now, Rome will suffer the loss of its trade guilds. It will have its economy made desolate, says John. Economic prosperity will be completely removed. They will be like a desert, like a wilderness. Before, they excluded Christians from participation in trade. They wanted to keep them poor because they would not worship the Emperor Domitian. John says Rome will suffer the loss of all of its trade guilds because of its persecution of the saints. Their sin was pharmakia. That was the sin of Babylon in history, and that's the sin of New Babylon for John, Rome. It's the sin of pharmakia in block 3. Let's go to block 3. We're going to look at the last two verses in chapter 18. In verse 23 we read, And the light of a lamp shall shine no more, and the voice of the bridegroom and of the bride shall be heard no more at all in thee. Thy merchants were great men of earth. By thy sorceries all nations were deceived. And sorceries is the Greek word pharmakia. And it means sorcery, but it means also sorcery through drugs, so the same type of influence that a drug could have on the mind of another individual. And it causes those individuals to wander from the straight and narrow path. Planao. If we cross-reference Isaiah 3:8, who has taken the counsel against Tyre, the crowning city, whose merchants are princes, who are the honored ones of the earth. Rome honored wealthy merchants, not God. The judgment of Tyre consisted of overturning her merchants, says Beale in his commentary. That's what's going to happen to Rome. And especially Ezekiel 28:5, By thy merchandise hast thou increased thy riches, and your heart is lifted up because of your riches. Self-glorification reaps judgment. It is the idolatry of calling oneself great. It's the idolatry of arrogance, the idolatry of pride. The use of sorcery here emphasizes Rome's deception of the people luring them into emperor worship like the influence of a drug, influencing their mind to participate in the imperial cult. That was the sorcery that Rome was using. This lure into emperor worship. In Galatians 5:20, the lust of the flesh includes pharmakia, sorcery. But it's a sorcery of a lie that's being used to sway people from the straight and narrow path. In Isaiah 47:10, you have trusted in your wickedness, your wisdom has perverted you. You say, I am, and no one else exists. That cross-reference defines what's going on with pharmakia. That shows the arrogance, it shows the greed, it shows the idolatry. In that verse, 47:10, Isaiah, you have trusted in your wickedness, your wisdom has perverted you. You say, I am, and no one else exists. That defines Babylon in history, or Tyre, and that defines Rome for John. Now in verse 24 we read, and in her was found the blood and of the prophets and the saints, and all who were slain upon the earth. Horisko means to discover after searching out the true foundation of what Rome stood for. You will discover the blood of the prophets and the saints. Rome will be judged because she persecuted the community of faith. Cross-reference Jeremiah 51:49, just as Babylon was judged because of the slain of Israel. Babylon has caused the slain of Israel to fall, and so Babylon shall fall. John is thinking of Jeremiah 51 and applying that same judgment against Rome. You could just insert Rome into that Jeremiah passage, just as Rome is going to be judged because of the slaying of the church. Rome has caused the slaying of the church to fall, and Rome shall fall. John is using the Old Testament prophets to emphasize the fact that there's no real mourning for Rome. The maritime merchants, they mourn the loss of their own riches. The judgment that is coming upon Rome is not going to gain any sympathy. It's just going to be a despair over the fact that seafaring merchants are going to lose trade wealth. And the judgment is certain. It's going to be the certainty of Babylon being thrown down. Rome will be thrown down just like Babylon was thrown down. Just like the judgment stone was cast into the Euphrates, the judgment stone shall be cast into the sea, and it shall completely erase Rome into a wilderness. It shall cover Rome and erase all trade guilds, all trade economy, and leave Rome desolate. That's what the judgment will be. And why is this judgment coming? Because Babylon was guilty of pharmakia, and New Babylon, Rome, is most certainly guilty of pharmakia. The drug of a lie. They are spreading the drug of a lie. They are spreading the drug of a lie. If you worship Domitian, you'll be allowed to participate in the trade guilds. If you worship the emperor and enter the temple of the imperial cult and worship, burn incense before the statue of Domitian, you can participate in trade. John says this revelation is a certainty that Rome will be judged for pharmakia. They will be judged for the sin of pharmakia, the drug of a lie, the drug of idolatry and greed and arrogance. They will suffer a great tribulation Then the saints shall be rescued, and then they shall reap bowls of wrath. The bowls of wrath will come down against any evil kingdom. In John's day, that was the kingdom of Rome, the Roman Empire. They shall reap the bowls of wrath in the judgment from the living God, from Jesus Christ, the Messiah. They will suffer tribulation, and then they will suffer the wrath of judgment. They shall be made absolutely barren, absolutely desolate, absolutely turned into a wilderness, and all of that wealth shall be removed from them. They shall lose everything. But no one's really going to mourn them, because the only mourning that's going to be done is the despair over other merchants losing the wealth of trade. Ultimately, John tells us in this passage, the sin of Babylon was pharmakia, a sorcery of words that acted like a drug to lead people astray. The sin of Rome is pharmakia, the drug of words to lure people into the imperial cult, which is idolatry and sin, and based on greed, because basically people did it to gain trade rights within Rome. So it's all about arrogance, greed, and idolatry, and that all gets abbreviated under one term for John: pharmakia, sorcery. It's a three-headed sorcery of idolatry, greed, and egoism. Idolatry, greed, and egoism equal pharmakia in the Greek. It means sorcery, but it really means the lie, the drug-like lie that you must become an idol worshiper to enjoy the financial benefits of the trade guilds in Asia Minor. John refused to do so. He was exiled to the Isle of Patmos. Other believers refused to do so. Many were martyred. They are in heaven. Their blood is under the altar in heaven. Their souls are under the altar in heaven. They are pleading and praying, "Avenge our blood, please, Lord Jesus Christ, avenge our blood." They get that answer. They get that answer in 18:20 through 22, Block 2. They get that answer. They are avenged. Therefore, there can be rejoicing in heaven, because the verdict has come in favor of the martyrs against New Babylon. But not just the martyrs, all believers that have been persecuted. Every single believer that has been persecuted by the imperial cult and the arrogance of Domitian and the provincial council of Asia Minor that supported emperor worship, Pliny the Younger, the governor, who supported Domitian and the imperial cult. All of that is going to be judged severely, says John in his passage here. But he abbreviates it all under one Greek term, pharmakia. It's going to wrap up chapter 18, 17 through 24. That wraps up chapter 18. Believe it or not, next lesson we will get into chapter 19.